So, when you're having an argument or a debate about politics, the number one response that people have is that they say it's just one thing. They say, oh, it's just a small incident, so it's no big deal. However, things are happening every single day and they're starting to build up. So I've put together a list of articles over a 1-month period, and honestly speaking, you can start to see the decline of the UK in real time. Because we actually started the month off pretty strong. We had a former military base in the UK that had started to house migrants, and it was about 500 of them. But the problem is that it wasn't a former military base at all, because it actually turns out that it was still being used for military purposes. And it just completely undercuts the safety of, people like local residents as well as the wider public as well. Not to mention it was a total lie from the government whenever they mentioned it. And then the very next day we took a short trip to Ireland, where the so-called Minister for Integration said that 15,000 illegal migrants in the country was, quote, the new normal. And I'm not sure what he thinks the new normal is going to look like, but I don't think it's the future that he had in mind. And then the following day we had a story that was quite similar. We saw how mysterious passport stamps were ending up on migrant passports. They're essentially approving visas and they don't know who or they don't know how they're doing it. They're just genuine passport stamps. And they're ending up certifying illegal migrants as just, like genuine UK citizens like yourself. And they actually think that it could have happened thousands of times as well. And I actually don't think that they have a list, so they can't go back and see who's got one, pretty much making it impossible. Then we needed to clear our minds, so we took a trip to Blackpool. When upon arrival, we saw that they were creating an entire LGBT village. And they were doing this without holding a single vote. Because they don't want to hear public opinion, but they will be spending public money. It's just so weird to see, there's no reason for them to have just an entire village. That's Blackpool. That's a at least somewhat of a child-friendly place, but a lot more child-friendly than that. Now I probably wouldn't even want to touch the 2p machines. And then, in another line of so-called just one things, we saw how illegal migrants were to be given luxury flats worth $1,400 a month. This is whilst the local residents, just like everyone else, struggled to get housing. And to be fair for the locals on this one, they actually did manage to push back. They essentially created a campaign and they managed to get their local MP to pretty much reverse it. So it's been paused for now. They haven't said how long it's going to be. I'm guessing just until the news dies down and then they'll be straight back in. Then we had probably one of my favourite videos so far. And like I said, all of these just one thing stories, they only span 1 month. So that pile is getting pretty high. But these speed cameras, like I said, were placed all over Wales, and the actual list itself was just too long to fit onto one image. So what I had to do is I had to get it onto an Excel spreadsheet, resize it, and sort of put it into a different layout, and then put it back into an image format just to fit it on screen. And the thing is, it's still too small to read, but I actually think that makes it even worse, because this really is just a cash grab. Because they try and tell you that the police are overstretched. Yet the amount of manpower that it would take to do all of this is absolutely outstanding. I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to earn millions as well as cost millions. Then we had this one from the BBC, again in the same month, where green nutters actually popped the tyres of a Tesla. Because it really does show that there's just no pleasing these people. You can buy the 50 grand electric car, and you can probably put the flag in the window, but they simply don't care, showing that the problem isn't you, it's actually the nutters, because nothing is safe, not even so-called green electric cars. And because the Tesla tyres are popped, the following day we took a taxi to London, where Sadik Khan was having a few issues with his ULEZ cameras, but there was a problem. He refused to say how many issues he's actually had, and he would not tell you how big of a problem that he's dealing with as well. Essentially, people wanted to know how many ULEZ cameras had been taken down or affected by the Blade Runners. But Sadik doesn't want to tell you that. He only wants to tell you the information that is positive to him. Anything else, even though it's public, is just held under lock and key. I think the reason why he does it is because he knows full well that the more people that know about what's going on, It essentially sort of normalises it. So I'm guessing his strategy is to try and give the Blade Runners as little coverage as possible, because otherwise he knows it's just going to make more and more of them. And once we've brushed the smell of London off of us, we headed northbound the next day straight to Manchester, where similar to Blackpool's entire village, they've actually created an entire housing development just for the all-important communities. An entire housing development, just LGBT. And to be fair, this is probably one of the biggest examples of division that I've seen in a very long while, because they're just going to block 99% of the population from applying to this place. And if you tried to do it in reverse, you'd get shut down immediately. Then we saw how the city of Bath had created 5 low-traffic neighbourhoods. It was once a conspiracy theory, but now it's happening all around the UK from cities to villages. And all it is just one big attempt to keep you out of your cars. Then we had the long-awaited results from a Freedom of Information request that are made to the Home Office. I essentially wanted to know how many illegal migrants had military backgrounds or records. It seemed pretty basic to me, but I couldn't find the information anywhere. So I did the next best thing that I thought I could do. I put a Freedom of Information request and I thought I'd ask the government. However, they said for me, a tax-paying citizen, that it would be just too much money to get the information. And you can see in the yellow and the orange text on screen that they actually said to me that because it's going to cost more than 600 quid to find the information out, that they're just not going to bother. And like I said, this was to find out whether migrants have military backgrounds. It seems like something they should be doing already. But the thing that I really didn't understand about this response is that they don't want to waste 600 quid on people like me and you. And at the same time, they're handing out millions every single day to illegal migrants. Then once again, we took another trip to Ireland, where the very green town of Donegal was 1% asylum seekers. And it's actually a really nice looking place. But now it's slowly taking a turn in another direction. Because it started with 1%, then it'll be 2%, and then it'll be 3%. All the while people will say to you, they'll say, oh, it's just 1%. Then it will get to 15 and they'll say the same thing. They'll say, oh, it's just 1%, mate. You know, what are you going to do? Then it gets to 76% and you can see the picture from there. And then we saw Hertz Rental Cars. They're actually one of the largest rental companies on earth. And they're looking to offload and sell 20,000 electric cars and swap them to petrol and diesel, showing that despite the media push, the free market response is actually telling a different story altogether. I guess either that or Hertz are worried about the tyre poppers from a couple of articles ago. And because of all of this, we just needed to take our mind off of everything for a bit. So we booked a lovely trip to Costa del Sol. But unfortunately, on arrival we saw half the planet, because a 4-star luxury hotel had been given to migrants. And someone actually commented on that video, right? They commented saying, why have they all got the same shoes on? And to be fair, I think they actually are onto something. I'm guessing they're just government-issued shoes, like they gave them to them when they came aboard. But I can't actually remember the last time that the government gave me or you a pair of shoes as well. Actually, on second thoughts, now maybe that's a good thing. And speaking of the police, the annual police budget was announced. It's risen again, wouldn't you know, to £18.4 billion. And if you're wondering where the money's going, well, I guess you could make a Freedom of Information request. But if it's going to cost more than 600 quid to get the information, I guess they're just going to turn that one down as well. But actually, on that note, there is an article coming up in a few where you can see exactly where the money's gone, and it's actually worse than you think. But before that, we take another trip back to London, because that really does seem to be the centre of the nuttiness at the moment. And we visited a prestigious university. But the problem? Well, they had introduced a BAME-only scholarship programme. It's a fully funded university course, but you can't apply. I'm guessing maybe if you BAME you can, but it's very slim odds that you're here right now. But it's more division, and it's all in the same month. And although we're not done yet, I just wanted to take the time to say how big is this hot steaming pile of one thing so far. Again, like I said at the start, this is from the 1st to the 31st, because they try and tell you that it's just one thing. But Jesus Christ, this is getting dark. Because these are all videos that I've made topics on, and it's really getting worse by the day. And we did actually see some positive news as well. Because you can see that the Migrant Hotel has actually ended its government contract. But you can see by the image on screen that this ain't just no regular Migrant Hotel. This is absolutely luxury. This has got to be one of the best looking places in the local area, if not the wider county or even more. It's pretty much a castle, but for many years, Sudanese Steve has just been given the keys. And make no mistake, these hotel owners would have earned millions from the taxpayers. And at the same time that they'd have been doing that, they'd have been cancelling weddings and cancelling your bookings. But because our room at the luxury hotel was cancelled, again, we took a taxi to central London. But there was actually a major problem this time, because Sadik Khan had backed a plan removing the English language requirement for taxi drivers. And it seems even stranger when you consider that London is the capital of England, and that's all taxi drivers not needing to speak English. But this really is a safety concern, and it's also a major concern for the UK future. But can you imagine if you get into an accident whilst in the taxi? You might need medical attention, but the taxi driver, well, he don't speak the language. There's only one word you'll get out of him, and that's Gary. And in another downgrade, we saw the Royal Mail, who my dad actually works for. They say that they might be reducing the amount of days that they deliver your post. I guess that's just how things work these days. Like, you just pay more and more for services, but they actually just give you less and less. I think soon they're probably just going to be sending you emails instead. Then we saw how the UK government had built a mock plane to train how to force migrants onto the Rwanda flights. And honestly, I'd love to see the training on the day, because that's got to be an absolute laugh. But the real problem with this, right, is that we're told that these migrants, they're all good, they're happy days. But apparently it takes multiple men to get these people to board the plane. In fact, I'd hate to see how bad the average grandma comes off when it's her against these guys in the local village. Then we saw how Sadik Khan's plan of charging you to drive in your capital city actually came to a halt. Because people had gone round putting a few stickers on the cameras here and there, and it's actually really effective. But the thing is, right, whilst you would call this a decent joke, make no mistake, Sadik Khan would call this a crime. In fact, he'd probably give you a 4-star wanted level minimum. And again, speaking of the police and their billions, it turns out that they've created a bursary for BAME applicants. This is where they give thousands in cash to BAME people for becoming police officers. And it's money that you can't get despite it coming out of your tax money. Again, this is just more division, and the month still isn't over. I can't stress enough to you, don't ever let anyone tell you that it's just one thing. Either they've got awful memory, or even worse, they're out to skew your perception. And then we saw massive government overreach and massive government snooping. Essentially, the government want to start looking at the bank accounts of benefit claimants. Their argument, right, is that the benefit claimants receive taxpayer money. Therefore, the government said their bank accounts should not be private. However, the government also received their wages from public taxpayer money, meaning that it's one rule for them and one rule for you. Because you know full well that you couldn't take a look at Rishi Sunak's bank account, or even anyone far down in the government structure. If anything, they'd call it fraud and they'd probably put you in jail. But an even worse place to visit than there would be this train here. It's being called a beacon of hope, and it's roof to floor in the pride colours. And they must have spent thousands wrapping this train. And they do it, to impress like half a dozen people? But still providing zero value to the 99%. And then we saw a video that you guys really responded to, where Hertfordshire Council is looking to spend £7 million on their 20-mile-an-hour zones. £7 million! That's over a 3-year time span as well. And there's no new tarmacking. It's just a few buckets of paint and a few new road signs. And the rest will be spent on council meetings. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if 6 out of the 7 million is spent on council meetings entirely. But with all of these stories and all of these articles, people will still say, oh, it's just one thing. But it's a steaming pile of one things that is just growing bigger by the day. And if you wanted to see the videos that I showed you today, I'll actually leave a playlist on screen with all of them in. And again, thank you very much for becoming one of the 25,494 subscribers. And thank you for checking out this playlist on screen.
This country has gone crazy.